All Kurtis investigates tonight. Bodies found unrefrigerated inside a Stockton church where a pastor was illegally operating a funeral home. Cremated remains found stored in a U-Haul locker.
Kurtis Ming launched his investigation after hearing from the family of a man who missed his own funeral.
Yeah, when Dad died, they say the hospital gave them a list of local funeral homes. They had no idea the number they called was for a funeral home that already closed.
I was devastated.
Devastated, her dad, Robert Oliveira, seen full of life in this video. Never made it to his own funeral.
I was like, oh my God, how do you tell somebody that I'm sorry, he didn't make it here?
11 days after paying for her dad's cremation.
It just makes me sad.
The funeral home said his remains were not ready in time for the service. With the program already printed, the family had to cancel the cemetery portion.
I had planned my dad's funeral in advance and everything was falling apart.
The family thought they hired Jesse E. Cooley Jr. Funeral Services of Stockton. After all, that's the name on the folder they got. But the funeral home's website shows it closed last year, 3 months before Robert died. Carla says when making arrangements, the family was told to go to this church across town.
The only way I identified that it was where I was going is that they had hearses in the front.
We found Boggs Track Church with funeral vehicles parked outside and Pastor Steve Cooley named on the awning. The Stockton Record profiled Steve Cooley in 2013 as a third-generation funeral director. At the time, he told the paper, "You can't redo a funeral. There's no room for mistakes." But we learned at the time of Carla's dad's funeral, state investigators were already zeroing in on what Stephen Cooley was doing inside Boggs Track Church.
What was going on inside that church?
One, unlicensed activity.
According to the State Cemetery and Funeral Bureau, an investigator found multiple decedents in an unsecured and unrefrigerated room.
He found that there was an unsecured room and a body on an embalming table.
He could walk right in.
And he was able to walk right in.
In one case, the state found remains to be in a condition that prevented the family from having a viewing service. State records also show the discovery of cremated remains in paper bags and urns stacked up on top of each other in a U-Haul facility.
How many loved ones are we talking about?
That, unfortunately, is something that I don't have, and something part of our continued investigations. It doesn't matter if it's one body, if it's 10 bodies. It's still in violation of our laws and regulations.
Do these families know what happened to their loved ones?
That would be a question we'd have to ask the funeral director.
So you leave it up to the funeral director to say, hey, we didn't handle your loved one appropriately.
We can say that if you're watching this segment, thankfully, you can call the director and ask them what happened to our loved ones.
We did call Stephen Cooley, asking if the families knew.
I don't think they know the details of what happened. I am human and subject to error.
He claims a family dispute forced the Jesse Cooley Funeral Home on California Street closed last year. Caring for a sick wife, he admits keeping the phone number active and for months funneled dozens of arrangements over to the church where he's a pastor, which he says at one time was the location of the family's mortuary.
There is an area in the back of the building where the refrigerator was for 25 years. If I didn't have this church, which initially and originally was the mortuary, I wouldn't have had anywhere to go.
Cooley himself has an active funeral director's license, but he admits the church is not currently a licensed location to handle arrangements. And he says he did not have enough refrigeration for the remains handled there. Cooley also admits storing the cremated remains of 10 to 15 people at an off-site storage facility after families didn't claim them. He says those families have since picked them up.
I extend my sincere apologies on behalf of Cooley's Mortuary, and if it's going to be deemed me being unprofessional, then I'll just have to accept that. I pray that they would consider my situation.
After we got involved, he called Carla and apologized, although she's still upset her dad didn't get the funeral he wanted. Within days of his funeral, she did receive her dad's remains.
Hey, Dad. Miss you.
And he's now at rest at the cemetery.
I love you, Dad. I couldn't grieve because I had to deal with all the stuff that was going on. I had no choice.
Well, the state cited Cooley 14 times since July for things like unlicensed activity, gross negligence, incompetence, and fraud. Now, these citations could carry a total maximum fine of $70,000. The Cemetery and Funeral Bureau chose to fine him $8,200, which he has since paid.
Wow, so disturbing. So is he still operating?
Well, he says he's not right now, but he says once everything is cleared up with these fines, he does plan to apply for a license so he could operate inside that church.
As if the heartache from the loss isn't enough.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. If there's something you want me to investigate, let me know about it. Go to cbs13.com/call Kurtis and fill out our form.